Hello, guys. Welcome to the stream. I've got a super exciting show today featuring Julia, my co-host, and a special guest, Kyle New, which we'll bring on here very shortly. But I just want to thank all of the new subscribers. Had a super viral video happen, 73,000 views on my video about the DJI Mini 3 with the using using DroneLink, which I did not expect that to happen. So thank you to all the new faces. Hopefully some of you that are joining me here today found me from that video. If not, welcome to all of you that are seeing my face again. A few announcements that I do have. Next weekend, I am hosting a 2-day virtual workshop. So if you guys are interested in attending that, I'm actually going to show you guys where to sign up for that. If you go on my website, you'll see here, I've got the 2-day virtual drone photogrammetry workshop. Essentially, it's a 2-day event, so 6 hours each day, where we're going to go through everything that you need to learn about drone photogrammetry. There's also going to be a live data capture segment. I ended up opening a few more tickets for the early bird spot. So if you want to secure your spot there, be sure to grab it. I only have a few spots left here. You can see I've got 2. In addition to this live stream, you'll also get access to the recording of it. So you don't have to worry about being there live the entire time. You'll be able to access everything after the fact. So if you are interested in attending that, be sure to grab it. In addition, I also have some hats for sale if you guys want to grab a Pilot Byte hat. And I've also got some Pilot Byte tees. So if you guys want to rep Pilot Byte, then be my guest. I'd love seeing you guys wear some swag. But without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring in my co-host, Julia, here. So hello, nice to see you once again. Hopefully been having a fun fly week at least. Your mic is muted, just so you know.
My bad. Yes, I was gonna say I flew a lot last week in Florida, and this week I'm actually, it's been very hectic because I'm in Kansas City and it's draft week here. So it's been a good week on both sides of things, both work and play.
So not much work on the draft side, I assume.
No, not so much. Just a lot of sitting in traffic, waiting to get to the office this week. But no, it's been good. We had really good weather last week, did some RTK scanning for some topography for our surveyors in the field.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'd say, why don't we go ahead and bring Kyle in here and
100%.
let him give his full introduction, because we have some fun topics that I want us to cover today. So hey, Kyle, how are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on. How are you doing?
Dude, it's a pleasure seeing you on here. Seriously, thank you for being a guest speaker at my workshop a few weeks ago. That was a fun time.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I had a great time. Met some really cool people.
There's some great people in the industry, but I guess for everyone that doesn't know who you are, why don't you give us a little bit of a background and kind of your start into the industry and some of the things that you're focusing on now?
Sure. Yep. So for those who don't know me, obviously my name's Kyle New, and I am the CEO and founder of Full Time Drones. I got started in the industry back not long after the Part 107 came out. Have a production background, so doing a lot of video work, a lot of audio engineering. And when drones came out, they were just a cool, fun toy to add to the mix. So ended up picking up GoPro Karma as my very first drone and had a lot of fun with it. And in 2017 or 18, when Hurricane Irma hit, it was right after I got my Part 107, and we went out and did a little bit of storm damage assessment, not knowing a whole lot of what we were doing because drones were very new at the time. And so we were kind of going out riding lines, taking some photos here and there, taking some video. I think more than anything, they just used it for documentation and media purposes.
And wait, what year was that, Hurricane Irma?
It was 17, right?
17?
I think
okay.
so.
2017. Yeah, because
so that was early days of like
that was early days
certification and identifying who's in the air.
And then Hurricane Michael was 2018, and that was in between Irma and Michael. We did some proof of concept work for a couple of small municipals and some co-ops in Florida, and then Hurricane Michael hit, and it destroyed the Panhandle all the way up through Georgia. So We had a couple of pilots working for us at the time, started up in Georgia doing damage assessment. We kind of refined a good system, doing some inventory stuff for them, and then also being able to geo-reference where pole locations were, stuff like that. So we're actually able to deliver reports this time and working with the field commanders. It was really cool to see just in a year's time how much the industry had evolved and how much more accepting people were and how much more ready they were for the data collected. So that was my big aha moment to where, man, drones are going to really change the way a lot of industries do things. Not long after Hurricane Michael. That's when the first PG&E project started, and so flew out to Northern California. I was out there for about 9 months, and as soon as we wrapped up, Southern California had a couple projects starting, and I headed down south, and I eventually moved out to San Diego just because that's where the work continued.
It's where all the work's at. It's where the money's at. Got to follow the money, right?
It is, and the weather is pretty incredible
nice.
too. It's hard to complain about it. But,
yeah, you can't beat it. Coming from the East Coast, right? You're a Floridian, Mr. Ocala.
It's either raining or it is so unbelievably humid.
Sweltering.
Out here, yes, you get out here and it's like, I wish I'd known about this 33 years ago. It's a long time ago.
I want to touch on the work that you did very early on, because I'm sure there's some people lurking in here watching this, try to understand, what are some of the opportunities that exist, right? So let's start very early on, how that transpired and how that's evolved over time. And for those of you that are watching, just feel free to just ask any questions to us. We're going to do our best to answer them. But yeah, Kyle, go ahead. Just let us know, like, what was that process initially starting out? What were some of the initial tasks? Because it was a big question mark of how can drones be leveraged? And I'm sure you guys were the forefront of it. You guys were doing all the discovery, we'll call it the R&D of it, right?
Yep. So yeah, early on when we first started doing the actual inspection work in Northern California, it was kind of a trial by fire. We were bad pun to use, but we were kind of exploring, what deliverables are going to look like. So initially it was taking photos and just turning over an SD card. And it evolved into, now we're starting to sort and group and pair our own data. And it's evolved all the way until now. A lot of the work we work with actual utility linemen in the field, guys who have 20, 30 years of experience. So not only are we drone operators collecting data, we're also getting to learn through the journeyman lineman's eye of what we're looking at. Now we're collecting, sorting data. Guys are doing assessments in almost real time. So if there are emergency issues, they're being identified and notified right away, and utility companies are getting them fixed right away. All the way into now we're doing a lot of LiDAR work with them, doing vegetation management, doing construction true-ups, and even new planning, doing topography for new builds and stuff like that.
Would you say there's a lot of opportunity now, more so than when you first started, for people to get into it?
Yeah, I think over the next couple of years, you'll see. Right now, it's really big on the West Coast, and I think it's pretty big on the East Coast, and in between, there's small projects here and there, or projects that'll run for 6 months, and that's it. But I think as the West Coast is kind of setting the standard, you'll see a lot of utility companies start to use this. I'm starting to see companies go in-house, bring in 2 or 3 internal pilots who can fly year-round, and then starting to see more and more projects, even on a small scale, where small municipals, small co-ops are starting to do actual aerial inspections. And one of the big benefits is it's helping them update GIS mapping systems, and it's also helping them have the before, which is probably the most missed part of FEMA reimbursement after natural disasters, is you have to have proof of what the structure looked like before the hurricane came through, or the ice storm or tornado or whatever. And a lot
it's essentially their insurance policy is what it comes down to nowadays, right?
Yeah. So it winds up playing a big role now when natural disaster comes through, and they're able to say, hey, 2 years ago we took these photos, this is what it looked like. this is what the hurricane did, and now we fixed it, and this is what it looks like afterwards, and now they're eligible for reimbursement.
Yeah, I can speak personally to that actually, because as somebody who had my home down where Hurricane Ian hit down near Fort Myers, I actually teamed up with somebody that I worked with to grab one of our internal drones and my personal drone and took it out and flew the area right after the hurricane. And most of the areas were like, like fenced off. We weren't allowed to even go and look at our home or our property because it was too dangerous. And we were in a boat yard and a marina. So there was, boat pileups and things that were unstable. So it was really nice for all of us to be able to immediately take pictures, do a flyover, get really down in there, take pictures of everything, take videos of everything, and send it off to all of I had people up on Facebook who I had never met just asking, oh, do you have a photo of the Southeast Basin, or do you have it, this area? And they could send it off to FEMA or their insurance so that we could all get reimbursed. Because at that point, you're out of pocket until you can go out and, take pictures or get some sort of documentation, or, maybe if you get an agent out there, which is, a little tough right after a hurricane, especially, down in a really busy area like, Fort Myers, like I was in.
Well, that was actually a huge thing because we had what was Ian was the most recent one, right?
Yeah.
I had that happened last year. I was tasked to put together a team of pilots to go and do damage assessment on the commercial real estate properties that we're doing maps for, and it was very telling. Just having that data, because we already had done a scan for those properties beforehand. That was just part of our standard scope that we provided for our clients. Is we were to go out once a year, create a full digital twin of them, leveraging photogrammetry and mapping. And then we had a digital version of that in the cloud. Well, after Hurricane Ian ripped through, right, we knew the entire problem area is basically the entire west coast, southern west coast of Florida. And because we had our standard scope already put in place, we were able to send our pilots out there to go and map everything relatively quickly and had the data same day. We were able to do a comparison between what it looked like before and what it looked like after. And some of these roofs were ripped entirely off, like all of the paneling was gone. There were a bunch of HVAC units that were ripped and thrown across the street. Like you could see it in the data. And for our clients, it was huge for them to create a quick damage assessment to be able to send off to their insurance companies and figure out, what steps need to be done. Because the whole thing that happened in Sanibel with the Sanibel Bridge collapsing, they had a TFR up for weeks. And we actually had to work with FEMA to be able to get one of our pilots to go and do an assessment of the area, which actually turned out to be a good thing because FEMA actually had more data to work off of than what they were sending their other pilots out to. So, I mean, I think we all have firsthand experience working in some kind of hurricane in Florida, which is kind of funny. Not funny on the destruction side, but just the inception of
funny
all
because
this
it's
stuff.
sad.
Yeah. I've actually got a question here for you, Kyle. What, if any, special certifications should you pursue to be seen as a credible utility company? I mean, did you go and get any certifications outside of obviously your Part 107 to be able to start doing this stuff?
Yep. And right now, to my knowledge, there is not a kind of a universally accepted certification. I think the big thing is experience. A lot of companies that are hiring are looking for a kind of a minimum hour. And then a lot of companies more on the West Coast, if you don't have the hours, they'll bring you in as a visual observer. And once you have so many experienced hours in the field, they'll let you kind of train and test to become a pilot. And once you start flying, obviously you'll get hours pretty quickly. You're usually an 8 or 10 hour day in the field. You're usually flying for 3 or 4 of them. So I think I want to say somewhere around 150 to 100 hours is what they're looking for. If you're going to get on with a company on one of the bigger projects. But to do local municipal work, no. I think the biggest advantage you can have is just kind of understanding like the makeup and the construction of a pole, the function of all the equipment on the pole, so that you know what you're looking for. I know one of the hot words in there is cotter keys, but if you know the purpose of what cotter keys or cotter pins are, and what an open face switch is versus a closed switch, and some of those kind of things, then I think it gives you a huge advantage, because utility companies are looking for turnkey.
Right.
Anybody that we've ever flown and collected data for and said, here you go, I guarantee it's still sitting on a hard drive on the shelf collecting dust. It's, they want to know that we've taken the photos, we've done the assessment, and then we've given them a report that says, here is everything that we found with your line. From here, you make the best decision based on budget and everything else.
And you are hiring guys on your team, right? To
Yes.
do this stuff. So
Mhm.
what would be the path for someone to go through if you were hiring them? Obviously, they need to have their Part 107, but what prior experience should they have? Should they have a fundamental understanding of some basic skills in mapping and photogrammetry, or is there more to it?
I think there's more to it. There is some mapping and photogrammetry, but a lot of the mapping we do comes from the actual photos we take. Kind of relative to where whatever mapping system we're using from the utility, and there's sometimes utility companies don't have mapping systems, so we're taking the data we collect and creating one. But in my experience, most of the people that we have working didn't have experience when they came in. They were hungry, they were ambitious, they came in wanting to learn. To me, it's like any other industry. If you're coachable and you want to learn and you're hungry, then you're going to come in and you're going to be successful, because you're going to learn all the things we were just talking about. The actual piloting skills themselves comes from experience, comes from flying in a live wired environment. You'll kind of learn some of the do's and don'ts in the industry. You'll learn how to handle, customer service is a big part of it. You're flying a drone near people's homes.
Right.
And sometimes they're notified, sometimes they're not. So having, being personable, being present, being able to be visibly seen while you're flying, instead of just standing over by your truck and flying 10 poles down, barely maintaining line of sight. Those are the kind of things that separate the people who continue to do this and make good money doing it, versus people who are picking up jobs here and there but still looking for consistent work. And that's kind of what we look for, is somebody who's going to be a really good worker, who's going to continue to learn. And the piloting and the actual construction and makeup of utilities, that's all teachable stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Julie, you're going through the same thing as well with teaching guys, getting them up and running. Are a lot of the guys that you work with, they're all in-house, right? You don't do any subcontracting outside?
Yeah, I don't personally do any subcontracting. Some of our projects, if they have a need and they're in an obscure area or have an obscure need, then, or if we don't have the drone in-house right then we might sub it out for a few weeks. We try to keep it in-house though. And like you were saying, vigilance is one of our key core values. Because if you're a great pilot, fine. If you can fly really well, if you can map really well, if you know all the right things to do, that's all great. But at the end of the day, the person who's not pushing it to the limits and doing, that extra thing, and the person who just keeps the job boring and stays vigilant and does it exactly by the book, those are the kinds of people that we're trying to have, because accidents are going to happen regardless, no matter what. We're trying to minimize that risk as much as possible. But sometimes you just have a bird that falls out of the air. That's happened to our guys where, it's just a battery where the last cell wasn't good and it just drops out of the sky. That's nobody's fault, but because he wasn't flying 2 drones at once, or, casually flying it as far as he could while standing on top of a Connex. There was that much of the extra security being like, I did the right thing. I was a good pilot. I did everything that I could to make sure that this wasn't my fault. And then at that point, that we can, we did insurance, and we got, actually DJI sent us a new drone. It was an old Phantom 4, and they sent us a whole new bird, because they were like, yep, it was our problem. And I just that brings us a lot of peace, and it also keeps those people consistent and dependable. I know I can call those guys, and I know that they're not going to short me because they're doing something a little bit sketchy, because you can do things, you can push the limits, and I understand everybody does, but there's a line of vigilance that you have to maintain to be that dependable person that people want to employ in the future as a pilot, because anybody can pick up a controller.
Oh, absolutely. And then I've got one too many stories of me finding out some of the things that my pilots have done. And it comes back on us, right? Especially if we're managing an entire team. It's not necessarily the pilot that's going to get in trouble. Sure, they're going to get the consequences after the fact, but ultimately it comes back to us. And I would say, outside of running a program, outside of having knowledgeable guys, is having guys that actually can respect the rules too, because that goes so much further than anything else, right? You could have a guy that's not good technical, but as long as he follows the rules by the book, then that's a trainable person.
And he's going to get good data. If you're just following the the standard, you're going to get good data no matter what.
Yeah. Some of the guys I would find out, they would be running their entire mission while watching Netflix in their truck, or they would let the drone go up and capture a property and then go do something else in the property, leaving their controller in the truck. And I'm like, dude, like, that's not what you're supposed to do. And we wouldn't give them any breaks. We're like, you're done. Like, you're not working for us anymore, because one, that goes against having your Part 107, and two, that goes against all of the training that we put you through, right? That's just not, it's not a good representation of the brand.
Yeah, the risk is on all of you at that point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. So outside of my suggestion for people that are wanting to get into this industry, outside of having some basic technical skill, is just being an honest person and just doing things by the book, even if it's boring, right? It's an inspection job. You're not out there creating Hollywood films. So
yeah. I think there's a balance. There's when it first started, it was kind of the wild west, and you had guys that
it was
just I'm same with you. So many stories, and we could do an entire YouTube, like a 4-hour live stream on that, and keep people thoroughly entertained. But
I mean, to an extent, it still is the Wild West. Like, there's still a lot of stuff being worked on. I know BB loss is one of the biggest questions that's being answered right now, and there are some experts in the industry that are paving the way for it. But then there's also a bunch of idiots that are, making it even harder for all of us. You got these people on YouTube doing these range tests with the Mini 3, and they're sending it out like 5-10 kilometers. It's like, dude, come on. There's a reason why we're so far behind from the entire rest of the world. So it's interesting.
BB loss, especially in the utility industry, BB loss,
it's crucial.
It scares me a little bit. It's important for certain aspects, but it scares me a little bit, because some of the biggest hazards you're going to run into, again, are customers. And if you're not visible and able to interact and kind of have that conversation because you're locked into a screen, and then you also have vegetation. You're doing inspection work, and if you can't, there's so much vegetation near live power lines that I think it's going to take. It'll take some tweaking in the utility industry. It's great for someone like California to do the power shutoffs when the high winds are rolling in through the desert. They'll be able to fly BB loss for 10 miles and check to make sure none of the lines are down before they energize the line again. So it's way more efficient than guys on ATVs or walking the line.
Oh, absolutely. I think BB loss for VTOLs is totally acceptable when it comes to quadcopters, or just any UAS platform. That's when I think it's a little iffy. It really just depends on what you're doing. If you're out in the middle of the desert, then have at it. But I think as soon as you hit any of the mountain ranges that we have here in the US, then that it becomes a big question mark, due to not just the line of sight, but how up to date is a terrain map for areas. Are you going to fly LiDAR, in a massive swath on a fixed wing and then import that into a drone? No, you're not, because it's not cost effective. I had this conversation earlier today with a survey company. They're like, well, we have 500 square miles of land. I was like, oh, VTOL. But they're like, but we're only working on 20,000 acres. I'm like, oh, then you don't need VTOL. But Kyle, you also do a lot of stuff in telecom too, and from some of the suggestions that I've given people, especially in my workshops, at any or consulting that I do, I talk about VTS as being one of the companies for people to start, not look for a long-term career, but to start in. I know Talon is one of the biggest providers for the work in the industry, and you actually do a bunch of contracting with them too, don't you?
Yeah. So Talon's one of they're probably the biggest in the telecom space. So we're one of their vendors and do quite a bit of work with them. And then you also have, you have some direct contracts with companies like T-Mobile. We don't do any of that work just because it would go against our contract with Talon. But we also work with B&T engineering firm. They run the Dish Network project.
Okay.
So I think there's becoming more and more opportunity. I think a lot of people don't know that aren't doing it, but it's not just AT&T, Verizon, and T-Mobile anymore. It's
It's
T-Mobile
more. You got more people.
but it's Dish Network coming into the 5G space, and you're starting to see U.S. Cellular and some of these other companies that have done different things now start to move into the 5G space.
Yeah.
And I think the whole.
Do you think you could talk a little bit about some of the opportunities that exist and how some people, especially those that are watching, how they can get into that space? Because it's not one of the biggest questions that I always get on my end is, how do I get into the industry? Well, it's not as simple, well, you got to do this, this, and that. There's so many different niches that exist. And for me, I'm mainly focused in the construction side of the industry, where you're doing a lot of the T&D and telecom. So, I don't know too much about telecom, but I do know it's growing. I mean, that's how you and I got connected, through a mutual friend of ours that does telecom. So what are some of the steps that people can take, especially here being in the US? I guess this really more so applies to everybody here in the US. But what are some of those steps that people can take to get themselves into that line of work?
Yeah, I think telecom's the easiest barrier of entry into commercial work. You can get Phantom 4 Pro, which is my recommendation, but Talon does allow like a Mavic 2 Pro, anything really with a 1-inch 20 megapixel sensor.
Can you use the Mavic 3 Enterprise now? I'm seeing some questions.
Yes, you can use the Mavic 3 Enterprise. Yep.
Okay.
And the main thing is the point of interest mode, being able to either fly it through DJI's apps or through Litchi. So, slightly different capture methods, but same basic concept. You're creating a digital twin 3D model of the tower with point of interest mode. If you're doing capture for Talon, you're doing certain carriers. So, it's identifying which carriers are on the tower and making sure you're orbiting the right set of antennas. And, with Talon, they actually do a lot of civil capture. So they're opening up cabinets and identifying everything for pre-construction, and then after construction's done, going back and doing a post-construction site survey, and they're providing a ton of valuable information to their clients. So it's a growing space for them. Dish Network is, they had a huge rollout in 2021.
Yeah, that's right.
2022 slowed down a little bit. They were kind of doing some post-construction after their huge pre-construction rollout, but now starting to do more post-construction, starting to do pre-construction again, expanding their network. You're starting to see U.S. Cellular. There's another company out here.
And are you hiring people for those roles? And if not,
Yeah.
what are some other avenues that people can go down to look for work in that industry?
Yeah, and so we hire. I have more people working for us in telecom than anything, but a lot of it, especially with Talon, it's pretty regional. We work in the Southeast region, kind of the Gulf States area. We work throughout the central United States. Got a pretty good footprint from Pennsylvania all the way over to kind of the Chicago area. And then we work the entire West Coast. We work the border of Mexico to the border of Canada, in California, Oregon, and Washington. And then we do a decent bit of stuff in Texas. There's other companies out there. I don't know how big some of the footprints are, but I know there's a company called MVS, based out of Texas. They do some central stuff. You've got kind of APS, I think it's Aerial Production Services, maybe, but they do oil and gas, but they also work with Talon. Very reputable vendor. They do a lot of work in Florida, which is we don't have a huge footprint in Florida. And then VTS is up in the Northeast. They do a lot of the kind of New York, Pennsylvania, like we kind of split Pennsylvania up.
They're actually getting some random places too. One of the guys that I had go through my mentorship program a few months ago, he's based out of Oregon, and VTS had some work out there, but their stuff is like all over the place. It's not in a concentrated area, which you would typically think, but for the most part, I think at least from what I understand, it's beneficial to have guys like us or pilots like us to go out and capture these towers for these inspections, because you're not going to send they're not linemen, but you're not going to send a rep from T-Mobile or AT&T to go climb that tower and figure out what's going on, or at least not so much anymore.
and they can't do mass scale. We had, I think, our best month last year with Talon. We did right around 1,000 towers in 1 month. So multiply that by how many vendors they have working for them. I think probably for that month they did 4,000 towers. So that's a lot for guys to get out. So you see companies like ATC, they have their own in-house pilots and do some stuff. You've got other smaller vendors, kind of like 5x5.
ATC is American Tower Constructors.
Yeah, American Tower. American Tower Company.
Tower Company. That's right.
American Tower Company. So they're one of
pretty big.
One of the actual site owners. Crown Castle is another one of the site owners. I think they sub a lot of their work out to a company called 5x5, and then
their 5x5 is actually based out of St. Pete.
Yep.
And so it's funny because I heard about them. They're actually doing some cool stuff. There's a company outside of Houston called, I think, 4M Investments. I might be wrong on this, but they've got this crazy rig where they're getting down to like 6 millimeters of GSD accuracy. They have this custom rig that they built. It's 2 Sony cameras conjoined together.
Oh, 2 of them.
Shooting 120 megapixel images. It's wild. They showed me their setup. That's actually, Kyle, that we were messing around with the Chaton. We brought the Chaton down there to their office and showing off kind of our custom config with the Gremsy gimbal, with the Air Commander setup. Like, it was a whole custom setup. They're like, oh, that's cute. And they bring out their massive drone with their 2 Sony cameras on there. I'm like, okay, you guys have us beat.
Jeez.
So I've seen the setup, and I've known a couple guys who flew it, and I can't imagine having to upload that data at night.
Oh my God.
They're doing, they actually have their own servers that they're processing on. They use context capture for a lot of their, for actually most, they're actually, I think, partnered with context capture because they have their own node that they do their processing on. But they loaded everything in, and they were literally zooming into one of the threads on the one of the bolts that was sticking out. And I was like, Jesus, like you could see an ant crawling on that thing. Like it was wild. Yeah, it was pretty cool.
I thought I was doing well with the like 46 megapixel, 42 megapixel, whatever the matrice is. Thought I was doing well there, but man, 120. I will say I would not envy
they're paying a lot of money for it. That's the thing.
Oh, no kidding. But it's that's a real machine right there. Wow.
Yeah.
So if I ever need to get down to 1 millimeter, I'll call you guys and forward me a contact from over there.
Perfect. I want to take a few questions here from the audience. So I've got, let's see here. I'll bring this one in here. How would you recommend starting off in the business of aerial observation / data collection, and what softwares would you recommend to begin with as a startup in the industry? Kyle, you wanna try and tackle that one?
Yeah, I'll take it from my perspective. If you're trying to become a well-rounded pilot / data collector who can stay busy year-round, because if you just focus on one niche, it's great for learning, but I don't think it's going to keep you busy year-round. So I think being good at using the drone itself, using some of the features within DJI, like point of interest mode and some of the active tracking modes, and then even something like Litchi, which is kind of a little bit slightly better on the Phantom 4, just because you can see gimbal angles and stuff. And then outside of that, if you're looking for ease of use and just like turnkey functionality and budget's not an option, Drone Deploy's pretty incredible. It's hard to beat. If you're
it's costly.
It is. If you're willing to learn a little bit, then I think Pix 4D is really good. And then if you're wanting to use free, you've got like WebODM and some of those other sources or Maps Made Easy, where it's pay per map.
Yep.
If you're getting into mapping. But I think telecom, mapping, and kind of construction are 3 of the easier industries to get into as far as an actual skill set. You can learn it pretty quickly and just kind of fine tune. And then as you pick stuff like that up, then you can start to translate some of that knowledge into utility inspections and solar inspections, and kind of continue to evolve what you offer as a data collector.
Yeah, I stand by that one.
Yeah, I was gonna say I would agree with all the things you just said, like from beginning to end. Trying with like something free or easy, like Maps Made Easy, and I feel like after you've mapped with one or two programs like Pilot or DJI Go or Fly or whatever you're doing it with, after you've mapped a couple times, you get it. You find your sweet spot with your personal drone, whether that's 70% overlap at 250 feet or 70-80 overlap at 400 feet, depending on what you're flying, whatever that turns out to be, then you can kind of just carry that over between applications, and the more variety you have of flight, like you're saying, those intelligent flight modes. I didn't use those at all my first probably year and a half flying. And then I downloaded Litchi thinking that this was going to do something, really exciting, and it did. But I had guys in the field saying, why would you even download that when we have all these intelligent flight modes? It's like, well, honestly, I was kind of afraid to use them. And so I went out into a field and practiced them on my own. I was like, okay, I was just afraid it was going to fly sideways into something. I just didn't know what would happen. So just experimenting with those things. And like you said, like you're not necessarily mapping, you're inspecting. I probably need to have some variety of all of those things. So yeah, I would totally agree from beginning to end all the things you just said about the recommendations.
Yeah, none of these softwares are a one-trick pony. All of them have their use cases, and there's a time and a place for each one of them, right? And at least I know in telecom, you're hardly ever doing a fully autonomous mission. You're using, we'll call them like guide rails, like what you would have in bowling, right? You set the point of interest to help that automated feature for you, but you're still triggering the camera. At least you're watching the intervals of it and capturing that data. Same thing when it comes to the T&D work, right, Kyle? Because you guys are doing a lot of manual flight on it, with some variation of automated mission. But what would you say, like 80% of it's manual, the other 20%'s automated? Or is it the other way around?
On the inspection side of thing, it's
almost 100%.
100%
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, oh wow.
When we do a lot of like the LiDAR and photogrammetry captures, it's all it's probably 75% automated, but you also have to kind of keep an eye on things if you missed a little bit or you need some extra overlap due to vegetation or just really thin wire or secondary drops, stuff like that it's hard to build into the flight plan. Then you do some manual flying there, but for the most part, the LiDAR capture itself is pretty autonomous. But outside of that, inspection work is 100% manual.
So I've got a little controversial thing I'm going to bring up here, but before that, I got to have a little shameless shout out. If you guys do want to learn some of the technical stuff, I am hosting next weekend, May 6th and May 7th. I'm hosting a 2-day virtual workshop. I still have a few early bird tickets left. So if you want to get your spot secured before the price goes up, check the link that I'm posting right now in the chat. Just be sure to grab it. If you've already grabbed it, thank you. I'm excited to see you guys there. But to the controversial question that I have, do you think that drone pilots will become irrelevant over time?
It's funny that comes up as a lot. More and more people think their software are going to replace drone pilots, and I think just the opposite. I think that there are too many outside variables that you cannot account for in planning this stuff, and especially in the utility inspection industry. One of the biggest hazards that you run into are vegetation, and unless you fly LiDAR to get a very accurate depiction of where all of the vegetation is, and then try to autonomously plan the missions within the next 6 months, you're not going to be successful at it. I've seen so many software companies come out to the West Coast and say they have the solution, and having automatic camera settings doesn't work, and having autonomous flight plans that we can draw around this structure doesn't work. I've watched so many companies come out here and fail. I've even seen companies come from overseas and not be able to get the drone off the ground. So I think there's a hybrid model that works. It's point of interest mode being part of that. And like you said, flying the Phantom, you can manually shutter if you want to fly faster orbits, or you can do the timed intervals and just kind of let the drone do everything, and you babysit and make sure that it's not flying too far away from the tower, too close to the towers. It's not going to orbit perfectly, but making sure your gimbal angle stays good, so making sure your exposure settings are good. Those are all things that are always going to have to manually be done, because a camera is going to look at something and say, oh, well, in order to fix this lighting, I need to change my aperture to 2.8. Well, now half of the tower is going to be bokeh out, and you're not going to be able to see what you need. It's not going to create a good model. So I think if that happens, it's a long way off.
Absolutely. This is a little bit of a sneak peek into a video that's coming out this weekend, because I've been getting this question the same as you. Oh, all of this software is coming out, right? We have AI, we have computer vision, we have machine learning, we have all of these cool fancy buzzwords, but what about anomalies, right? What about being able to get into the nooks and crannies where you can deem it safe to get in there and you get to determine the camera settings? Because sure, right, we've got these great, $1,000 phones in our pockets that do perfect in just about 99% of situations. However, when it comes to inspection work and when it comes to generating very specific data sets, a computer's not there yet.
Mhm.
It's not there yet. And we need to help, aid it, right? We've got the blob of clay on the table, right? We got to help mold how it comes out. And I think it's actually going to become more crucial that more pilots get into this industry that have a better technical background. And when it comes to flying skills, right, you don't have to be a magician flying, right? We're not asking you to do 360 flips in the air like a FPV pilot. It's more of just the monotonous task of being able to, okay, I know what camera settings I need to go at it in this approach. Oh, and we lost Kyle.
But wait, I'll add to that.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think that, almost like the way that people have adopted like Spot, that when Spot is walking around a job site, Spot, like the autonomous robot dog, if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, Spot still needs somebody to walk with him. Like Spot does not walk around a job site by himself. He still has somebody with him. It's like a early Roomba. If you think of the most basic type of robot that's doing its own thing, your Roomba will get stuck in a funky place and it will go in the circle in that little side. That's kind of the way drones potentially could be. And I think it's not so much the autonomous, but more of the virtual pilot.
Yep.
I've seen some drone docs lately. I got to see a few in person where we flew. I was in St. Louis and we flew a drone up in Michigan with some of our public safety officers. And it was eye-opening just to think, if I have in the construction world, if I have a safety guy or a quality assurance gal or a warranty specialist that has a thermal drone in another state, 5 states away in a box, first off, you still need somebody there in person to watch it go. But my warranty person out in the West Coast could very easily fly it themselves on that site. And that's kind of that beautiful happy medium of maybe they're going to use autonomous flight modes while they're doing that potentially, or maybe they're going to fly it manually, but we're just kind of crossing over into this virtual world of the possibilities of what we can do and how it can serve us. I don't think drones are going to take over. I don't think we're going to have like a bunch of autonomous drones all over the place. I think we're way, way, way far off from anything like that working well at all, especially considering that we're all in airspace that's full of other things that is already having trouble being regulated.
And we've already got people questioning about, drones in the first place. And one of the questions that I always challenge people is, when's the last time you actually saw a drone flying that wasn't your drone? Unless you live in one of those neighborhoods that Drone Up is operating, or Wing, or one of these delivery companies, right. And it's a very few. There's I think 2 in Texas, 1 in North Carolina, a few in Virginia. Right. If you live there, then sure, you got me beat. But outside of that, when's the last time you've actually seen a drone that hasn't been yours flying, around you? And chances are probably 9 times out of 10, it's your own damn drone.
Maybe they saw it once at like a festival or
but then at that point, that person's breaking some rules already.
Yeah, they are. I always think that. I'm like, yeah, you're gonna get in so much trouble flying all over these people.
But I'm not gonna say anything. I'll let you get in trouble. So
yeah, I'm not gonna fly here because I know how in trouble I could be. I'm pretty sure that's a felony.
Yep. I've got an interesting question here. Will there continue to be a need for small one-man drone businesses, or will bigger companies start to hire their own pilots? I have my own thoughts about this. Julie, I know you work for a company that hires,
I am the bigger company.
The bigger company, and yep. Kyle, I know you run your own thing, but what are y'all's thoughts on this?
I think both. I think there's a need for both. So with companies doing this, you're going to bring pilots in, and I think they'll have skill sets, but if you develop a big enough skill set, you're not going to work for a company. You're going to go start your own thing and say, hey, I can contract out and work with land surveyors and do photogrammetry and mapping and maybe even jump into LiDAR to do topography. And I'm going to go start scanning solar fields and I'm going to do all these different things. So I think there's some of the companies starting to hire pilots in-house, I think is actually a good way to get into the industry with very little to no experience, because they're going to take you and they're going to train you. You're going to get to use all of the enterprise level equipment. You're going to probably have company vehicles, tons of training, access to all these softwares that we're talking about that cost tens of thousands of dollars a year. And your knowledge base is going to grow so much if you allow it to, that you'll be able to say, hey, I really love working for this company and I'll stay here. Or I'm going to take all of this that I've learned and apply a little bit of a business to this. And I'm going to start kind of my own side hustle, turned into one-man shop, turned into I've got a couple guys flying for me.
Absolutely. And as the bigger company that's training our guys grassroots internally, I have my surveyors and my quality assurance, my safety, my project coordinators, anybody who's in the field, I'm training them to be pilots so that it's an additional job onto what they're already doing. Not all projects are big enough, have large enough teams to support that kind of system. Some of them are really spread thin and they don't have the capacity to add another job on top of their job. There's also scenarios where it's way out in the middle of nowhere and it just makes more sense with the risk and the cost just to, contract it out. I agree. There's definitely a place for both. There's also times that you need niche things that you don't want to always invest in-house. Like we, for a while, did not want to purchase LiDAR because of how expensive the payload is. We wanted to ensure that we could bill it to a project. And now that we have that and have that built that internally, we can use it on other projects. But before then, it was like, can we see the return on investment? And maybe we wouldn't buy that internally, but I would contract out somebody like Dylan to come out and fly that site for me just that one time, because that's all I need is a LiDAR one time. So there's a happy medium of that. Obviously, as a 12,000 person company, we're trying to do all of it in-house. We have the capability and we have the bandwidth, but there's just that balance of not every single project across the United States and UK. Yeah, not all of them need all of that. And sometimes we just need somebody to come out and do, a $5,000 flight or, a $2,000 flight with just some very minimal stuff that we can just get by with instead of shipping out a $6,000 drone and having them hang on to it and whatever else, training the pilots, all that. Yeah. It's just, I agree. There's totally room for both.
And Julie, what's the company that you work for? There's a few people asking.
Oh yeah. I work for Black and Beach.
Awesome. And you guys you've been heading up that entire program, you and a few other people, I know that, but
yeah.
How has that changed since you've been there? And how do you see the direction? I mean, is it being more accepted that aerial data is a viable tool in I'd say engineer and surveyors toolbox?
Yeah, I would say it's been a mixed bag at first, but the buy-in is definitely happening. Since I've come on the team, there's just been a little bit more of just laymanizing the data. It doesn't need to be complicated. It's not this big scary thing. We have a lot of very high tech geo reference people who work their entire career in Esri and ArcGIS and understand all these layers and the topography and what they're looking at. And then I have these people who have never touched a drone before, never been in ArcGIS, and we're trying to put them in at this very high level.
High level, yeah.
Yeah, when we don't need to be that deep with everybody. No. Some of us just need to map and see our map and be able to measure it and do stuff in it. And that's kind of the bridge that we've created by using Drone Deploy. It's helped us really,
simplify that entire process. And
exactly.
Stupefy so it is what I like to say, scary. Which is probably not the right term, really. But
no, I mean, honestly, basic is best. Technology fatigue is real. This is a huge company. Yep. There's a lot of different solutions. There's a lot of different programs, lots
of moving parts.
Yeah. Yes. And things change. You get a new president or you get a new CEO and things kind of shift and you have to be agile, and that can be tough. So not inundating them with a bunch of programs that are a bunch of steps where you have to watch a ton of videos to understand what's going on. It's a lot easier when it's something intuitive where I can just say go and be free and break stuff and then call me and see how it goes. And Absolutely. That honestly, when they call me, it's a lot more productive than just being like, I'm so overwhelmed by how deep this information is that I just don't even know where to begin.
Absolutely. And as someone who's actually been on both sides, where I've been that one man band and also have ran an entire big organization with multiple different pilots, I would say there is definitely still opportunity for the one man band. However, it's not as easy as it used to be before. And my biggest suggestion is to go and work for those droners, ZiteView, Drone Up, Connexacore. I mean, the list goes on. Fly Guys, right?
Fly Guys, yeah.
To get your initial understanding and build your foundational knowledge, right? Because that's where you start building your expertise. That's where you start building your example data sets that you can then go and start selling to other companies, right? I actually had a conversation today with an engineering firm that's managing about 500 square miles of land, and they're buying and developing and redeveloping, and they've been leveraging satellite data for the longest time, but all of it's back from 2018. And the 2018 LiDAR data is what they're referring back to. And they only use LiDAR twice a year. They've probably paid for LiDAR twice a year, but now and obviously I'm talking more on the higher end, but now that the tools are more cost effective, it's not a prohibitive anymore for companies to buy it. Right. Shout out, David. I know you're here in the chat. But Rock Robotic, they just came out with their new R3 Pro, which a sensor like that, literally 3 to 5 years ago, would have cost you upwards of $500,000 to get that kind of data. Now companies can start bringing this stuff in-house. Now one-man bands can actually bring these tools in-house and be that subject matter expert for these small mom and pop survey engineering firms to go and get that data, this high quality data for not that much of an expense on both parties' end. So yes, there's definitely a need for one-man bands. But I would say 85% of where the jobs are going in the market are going to these bigger companies where they can sub out that work to these subcontractors. And where are these subcontractors getting the work from? From Fly Guys, from Drone Up, from Connexacore, from all of these big DPNs, these drone provider networks. That's where the opportunity exists right now, where you can go and get paid to learn, essentially, build your tool set, build your foundation, your company, and then be able to go out into the industry and actually start offering this service on your own. It will change over time, but that is the current way that I do recommend people that want to get started in this industry.
Yeah, I would agree with that, because bigger companies like ours definitely want to vet out their people, and having that company that's really recognizable, it just makes it easier. Often we just go with the easy button. If it's Fly Guys, we've already used them. They're an approved vendor, whatever. It makes it a lot simpler for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Kyle, I mean, do you have any experience with any of these third party DPNs?
A little bit, not a lot, just because we started in the utility space, and they're not really in the utility space, and even in the telecom space. I think maybe Drone Base does a little bit of stuff with Talon, but it's not scaled like most. So
it's not Drone Base anymore. It's
ZiteView or ZiteView, whatever. Yeah.
Rebranding.
I know. So not a ton of experience with them, but I agree with you guys. I see a ton of stuff in the forums about, this is a joke. They posted this, they sent me this email. It's $100 and it's 3 hours from my house. And I said, well, I mean, your parameters say that you're willing to go do that job for $100, 3 hours away. So don't be upset about it. But, I mean, you can learn a ton from working for these companies, especially in the commercial real estate, and like I said, a little bit in the telecom, but mapping, they draw out the missions for you. I mean, it's, you literally go hit a button and babysit a drone and learn, and you get paid a little bit of money to learn. I think that kind of experience is irreplaceable, and it's a great place to start for a lot of pilots who have no experience, because it's not just going to teach you kind of the foundations of it's going to teach you how to develop customer relationship skills, because you have to be accountable to whoever you're working with at those companies. You have to upload data. There's a lot of small things outside of flying a drone that go into being successful work. And I mean, ask guys like Andrew Dean from Mile High Drones.
Oh yeah,
dude's made over $100,000 working for Drone Base ZiteView, because he developed a great relationship for him. He does great work for him, and he'll go out and get after it.
Yeah. Andrew Dean's a powerhouse in the industry. I mean, he's
an OG.
He's an OG. He goes way back. But yeah, I mean, outside of that, I always bring it back to building relationships too. Building connections and relationships. Those are some ways for one man band drone service providers, DSPs, for them to get into the industry too. Because again, you can find a mom and pop that only needs the work every once in a while, but hopefully turn it into more than once in a while, where you're doing it, every few weeks. Because,
or even like architecture firms or like mechanical subs that don't want to take it in house but need as builds. Like there's smaller, different types of companies that like they don't even have to be quite a mom and pop. They might have 400 people and they just don't care to expand in that direction.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's always, there's always new things coming up, and it's always a good time to get started. There is never a too late point to get in. We're still crawling in this industry, so there's plenty of opportunity, and it goes beyond the U.S. market. Obviously, all the stuff that we're talking about here is pertaining to the U.S., but I know beyond the U.S. they're actually making bigger strides, I should say, because we have a lot of limitations here. If you look at the agriculture side of drones, we're like 3-4 years behind. When you look at South America, Africa, and Europe, they're leveraging these agriculture drones to the fullest extent, more so than anything that we will ever be able to do in the near future. But if you can get in early and start developing those relationships with the FAA, with the FCC, with these farmers and agronomists, there's some opportunity to grow alongside with them and be a pioneer, even though it's being pioneered everywhere else right now. But it's all of these different industries. There's opportunities. It's just a matter of picking a niche, finding the right people, and it's going to take some discovery and going after it. That's the one piece of the pie that most people don't do is actually take that risk, because all of us took a risk getting into this industry. For the most part, it's a robot that flies, right? That can technically take our job. But as we discussed, there's still a lot of opportunity that exists, and there's still a lot of need for skilled pilots. If you look at just the survey industry, and I've talked about this multiple times, but for every 3 surveyors that leave the industry, 1 surveyor is replacing them. And we are kind of at this in between where we can leverage these tools to actually help with that offset. However, we also need to be able to educate, and we also need to be at that level to provide that kind of data.
Absolutely. The education piece is so important. And I'm also seeing questions in the chat about like, if a school district was rebuilding schools and needed mapping for construction, how would you charge for that? I think another part that is helpful is getting involved with your community. If you know that they're doing community projects or bonds, I worked for a company that did a lot of education, K through 12, and higher ed. And we did a lot of bond meetings where we were, pitching these different things. And we rubbed elbows with a lot of people who were also trying to bid on these things. And when they partnered together early on, that really helped not only them understand what the budget overall is, so that you understand how much that you can actually charge for your services, but also knowing the GC, knowing the architect, knowing the engineer. Sometimes these school bonds come out very early on when they're just starting design, and doing a mapping of that area when they're starting design is probably about a quarter of the work that I do internally. So it's, and you don't need a special drone for that. You could buy a Phantom. I love the Phantom. Anything that maps, if you apply low and slow, you can get high quality out of any drone. I firmly believe that. So you just find that sweet spot, that ground sample distance, that's going to be a good pixel rate that that you can give them good data, and start teaming up that way. And also, I'm a big community person. I think that it's good just to be involved in what's in your area anyways, but expanding to your general area with churches and schools, libraries, things like that, that really kind of links you in, and then they'll definitely start using you in the future. That's how we found out some of our subs at my last company as well.
It also helps build your own knowledge base too, and understanding, because then you can go at those projects, approach it differently, rather than the typical mindset of the other 90% of projects that you would go after. It comes back down to community. I'm sure, Kyle, you guys do a lot of stuff in the community too. And you're actually about to launch a new community platform for us pilots in the industry to collaborate with and get new knowledge and everything too.
Yeah, I think just networking in general is probably the most important piece of running a successful business and getting your name out there. But being involved in the community, it's people see your name over and over. You continue to work on projects. A lot of people say don't go volunteer your time. You're selling yourself short. But I think some of the best connections I've made have come from me believing in something going on in the community and volunteering our services, whether it be just taking drones out and letting people see it and kids play with it, to filming things on site for who doesn't have a budget. And so I think those are things that are really important as far as building a network and building kind of you get to build your own view of like how people look at you within your community by doing things like that. So I think it's very important.
Awesome. Kyle, you want to stick around and answer a few more questions? I know Julia's got to get out of here. She's moving across the country to Alaska. So
oh wow, yeah. Give me like 2 minutes to switch camera platforms. My iPad here is about to die on me, and the charger's working but not fast enough. So I'll switch over to my phone, and then yeah, we can stay and hang out as long as you want.
Cool. Well, hey, Julia, thank you so much for hanging out with us. Guys, don't leave the stream yet. We're gonna be answering a bunch of questions here. So just go ahead and start dropping them in there. But hey, seriously, thank you, Julia. We'll catch you next time. My pleasure.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I appreciate your questions, and I'll try to answer them later in the comments because I know that some of these are directed at me and I didn't address them all. Other drones that are not DJI, Wingtra. Google it.
Wingtra, Census, Quantum, some cool ones.
All right, cool. See you guys later.
See ya. Awesome. I'll let you do your switching around here.
Yeah, let me make a switch here. You're running the show by yourself for about 2 minutes.
I'll run the show. I got it. Awesome. So I want to answer this question that I have here. I work at a college, and the GIS program is trying to add drones into the program. Any recommendations or requests you would like to see from people coming out of the program? Well, one thing that I would highly suggest is not only understanding how the drone platforms work, but understanding how the data outputs can integrate directly into a GIS platform. Obviously, in a GIS class, you guys are working with maps, you guys are working with all kinds of different data sets. So when it comes to the drone side of it, understanding just how to generate those models alongside with the different tools that exist, such as the processing softwares. So some of the free ones that exist that you guys could potentially use in your program would be Open Drone Map or WebODM. It's a free software. It's an open source software that you can take any of the maps or the images that you capture from your drone, throw it into that software, and basically build your model, your geotiffs that you would use. Definitely can build upon that as well if you guys are doing 3D reconstruction of properties or buildings or land, right? You can go and learn the methodology of how to capture those different data sets too. So, it's not cut and dry, right? It's not a simple, straightforward process in building these models, right? It's having that understanding, being able to follow it all the way through and build that out effectively for that program. So that would be some of my suggestions that I have. And let's see, I'm going to bring in a few more questions here. See, I have a question here about the DJI Mavic 3 platform, specifically just the Mavic 3 itself, and if DJI is going to push out the SDK support for it. To be honest, I don't actually think they will push that out because of the drones like the Mavic 3 Enterprise, the Mavic 3 Thermal, the Mavic 3 Multispectral. I highly doubt, or I highly see them putting that out there. It's a big doubt in my mind that that's something that is going to be available Granted, they did just come out with the SDK for the Mini 3 and the Mini 3 Pro. So if any of you guys have that platform, I did release a video just this past weekend. It's got 73,000 views on it. So if you guys want to check that out, you can learn how to build your own model with a platform or a program called Drone Link. So if you guys want to take a look at that, it's an easy to use platform. I mean, it's just like any other mapping software. So you guys can check that out. And we got Kyle back in here. Awesome. You're back. Cool. So tell us a little bit more about the transmission and distribution side. Some of the evolution that has happened from, I would even say, like the last year. Like what are some of the tools that you guys are moving towards and new trainings that you're starting to put out there to provide to new people that are coming into this industry?
Yeah, so I think over the last couple of years, it's gone more from a data collection service to a turnkey service. Not just being able to take photos, but also be able to apply to something like Esri ArcGIS or update mapping systems, whatever it may be, to actually being able to do an analysis of the pole and update, being able to do things like LiDAR. So I think utility companies are looking for a turnkey solution. One of the big pieces of training that we do now is when pilots come on, it's no longer just you're a drone pilot. Now you're learning about how certain things are built, whole inventory, how all the moving parts work, so that you know what to look for. You kind of know the deficiencies, the common deficiencies, the not so common deficiencies within a system, and then you're usually paired with an actual lineman, and so you get to just learn every single day. I still learn new stuff every single day working with linemen who've been in the field for 30 years because they've seen it all. And maybe I haven't seen something, but they bring things like that up. So that's the evolution. I think it's going to continue to expand in that regard. More turnkey, kind of transitioning away from you're just a drone pilot who can take photos and make things look good, but transition into, I think that's where some of those AI pieces are going to come in and be able to do real-time detection, things like that. So learning the industry, kind of like mapping and surveying, learning the industry itself, as well as being a very skilled drone pilot, is where you'll start to stand out.
I absolutely agree. It's getting that experience is where you're really going to learn the most from all of these different opportunities that exist, right? Because nobody's just going to pick you up and say, hey, go map 1,000 poles for me, and
right.
Have at it, right? You have to start slow and build into that rather than, nobody's going to throw you into that kind of environment. I think it would be pretty ballsy for any companies to do that, because I know building out my program, one of the first steps before we actually put them on a project site was to basically get a level of understanding of where their baseline is, right? Build a base, understand their baseline, and then build from that, right? Understand what their current skills and knowledge is within the industry and how they're applying it right now. Start with those simple tools, and then add on top of it with kind of our own programs that we've built to get them to the level that we need them to operate at.
Yep.
And let's see here. How often are you working with surveyors? Are you working with surveyors quite a bit?
Yeah, so everything we do in the utility side of things, doing LiDAR stuff, we work with surveyors. A lot of the big things, we're checking into known monuments for a lot of them, because, California, it's a little different. The earthquakes obviously shifting the position of the earth. So there's a lot of different datums. Caltrans uses their own. So the utilities all use different ones, and then you got your kind of more up-to-date systems. So we work with surveyors doing that. Also do quite a bit of kind of topography work out here in California because of the steep terrain and access. And we work with surveyors again as well on that. A lot of times, once we've developed a good relationship and they're comfortable with our data collection methods, with setting control, checking into those monuments, and actually collecting the data ourselves, then they'll just let us go out on site and do it, let us know what monuments to check into, We know exactly what they want delivered, and then we'll just go do verification, make sure that everything is accurate, and then they've got all the data they need. And we save them weeks at a time. We can fly a site. I can be in and out of a site, set control everything in about 2 or 3 hours, process it in 2 or 3 hours, and have contour files by the end of the day. And it's something that, due to terrain, it would have taken an actual field crew a week or two just to collect all the points before you even get it to a CAD drafter.
Oh no, absolutely. I actually had this conversation, the same conversation with the engineering firm that I was talking to today, and they understood what LiDAR is. They've used it before. However, they wanted to know, okay, if I'm spending 60 grand on a full setup, how are we going to leverage that? Is it worth it to them to spend that money? And I asked, okay, well, I challenged them. I said, well, how long does it take for you to get a survey out there to first go and capture the points? And this was just as simple as generating contours in heavily vegetated areas, right? They don't want to go through the brush and cut everything down and shoot all those points, right? It's heavily vegetated areas. So, for them at minimum, it would take 3 to 4 weeks to get somebody out there, and then another 2-3 weeks to get that data out. I told them, I said, well, spending 50 grand, or 60 grand, you can get the drone up in the air, data captured and processed within 24 to 48 hours in, we'll call 100 acres of land, compared to how long it would take for you to have a guy out there and do that. In addition, right, how much time are you paying for that labor to go and cut bush for, whack a stick for, 6-7 hours a day, and then eventually get some controls. And on top of that, they're gonna spend a ton of money.
Yeah, you can't do a month's worth of work in a day.
You can't. You absolutely cannot do that. And on top of that, one of the case studies that I was able to work on, which any of you that are watching today, if you guys watched my last stream with John, who him and I worked on a LiDAR project. It was like a 300-acre site out in New Jersey. They found that they were missing $100,000 worth of dirt because of a miscalculation on the contractor's end. We were able to help find them that miscalculation with a 1-hour LiDAR flight, which was wild. For them, cost them about 15 grand for that flight to find $100,000 worth of missing dirt. Sure, it still cost them an extra $100,000, but imagine a change order far into that project would have been worth more than $100,000, because it would have been okay, we need this out here immediately, when they could have found out that information 2 months prior. And just by those 2 examples that I gave to this engineering firm, they're like, okay, well, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, if we can have data captured and processed in the same week of 20,000 acres, then there's no reason why, we can't spend the money on it. I said, exactly. That's the right way of thinking. In addition to that, you can also think about how you can start leveraging that data in other aspects that you wouldn't have traditionally thought about, which I'm sure that's exactly happening in your line of work, where, okay, now we have a drone working with us. You explain how you have the linemen working alongside with you. Now the linemen are working more efficient because they have this tool that can get in places that would typically take them at least an hour to do that one spot. Now you can do it in 15 minutes? And we lost you again. And you're back.
Yep. So yeah, I think it's, drones are obviously completely changing, more than anything, they're saving time, which ultimately is money. But yeah, in the industry, or in the inspection industry, as well as land survey industry, it's just, it still blows my mind. We were able to do 1,700 acres of swampland in Florida. And
it's wild.
It's about 2.5 days of flying, just because weather was not super cooperative. Yeah. And then within about 4 days, process out 1,700 acres, 1-foot contours, and the surveyor went out and checked a few spots and set the boundary. And they were able to. They thought it was gonna take a couple months to do the survey, to split everything up like they wanted to, and start development. We got the data back in a week, and everybody was scrambling to start the project because nobody expected to be working for 2 months.
They're like, wow, all this data's here. I guess we got to go now.
Yeah.
No, that's a huge selling point with with this aerial data that we're able to capture. At the end of the day, I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but at the end of the day, it's just another tool that people can leverage for all kinds of different use cases, no matter what industry that you're in. And I did see a question on here asking if you need to be licensed for LiDAR. For data acquisition side of it, no, you don't. Even sending off the finalized data set to an engineer or surveyor, ultimately, if that data is getting checked, say it's a legal binding document from the state, or from a local government, then yes, you'll have to get a licensed person, a PLS, a licensed surveyor, to then stamp off your data to claim that it's survey accurate. But don't let this whole misconception of just because you're not a surveyor that you're not able to generate survey accurate data. You are able to generate survey accurate data. We're now able to get the same tools that surveyors are using. And at the same time, surveyors are leveraging these tools to the same degree. It's just, there's a few steps in between being able to call it survey accurate and just being able to call it accurate, right? I face this challenge every single day. I have people tell me, oh, your data is not this accurate, yada, yada, yada. However, when I turn it over to a surveyor, they compare it to their data sets. They're like, oh, yeah, this is actually more accurate than we thought it was going to be. It comes back down to knowing how effective your data can be and how it can be leveraged. And I always bring it back down to being an educator yourself, right? You don't necessarily have to go and be like myself or Kyle or some of the other people in the industry of putting out videos, educating people. It's as long as you know your stuff and you can go to your client and explain to your client what it is that they're getting, educate them on the full tool that you're leveraging to be able to be effective for them, then ultimately, it's a win-win for everybody, right? You're just becoming a data gatherer at that point. For the most part, that's what we're doing. There's really no different if a survey captures a drone data versus if we were to capture the drone data. They're just able to give the green stamp of approval of, hey, it's survey accurate. And obviously it varies from state to state. Florida is a little iffy with some of their laws. North Carolina is brutal with their laws regarding, flying a drone to create a map. You just got to look at your local state laws and policies and how people are going to react about it. But I would say simple as just don't say survey accurate, just say accurate. Or if you can go and get your ASPRS certification, then you'll be able to claim that your data is as accurate as defined by ASPRS standards. At least that's what I try and push people to do, especially starting out in this industry. Have you had any issues with that? Obviously, I know you do work very closely with a surveyor. So technically, your data is survey accurate. But before that relationship that you had, what were some of the steps that you would take to ensure that what you're providing to your client is as accurate as you say it is?
Yeah, I actually got lucky. So one of my good friends in Florida is a surveyor.
That's right. Yep.
The Phantom 4 was new, and photogrammetry was new. I think drone deploy was out, but it was still in its beta phases and just starting to come online. Got to work with him a lot. And that's actually how I learned everything that I know about surveying. Setting control, checking into monuments, the different datums, and how to locate them, and everything to setting boundary. Basically, being a field technician for a survey company, right, but also knowing how to use drones to expedite that process tremendously. So, got to work with him and develop the best method, in my opinion, for photogrammetry initially, and then into LiDAR data capture. So that's where, especially in Florida, you've got swamplands. You don't have a ton of crazy terrain like you do out here in California, and that's where LiDAR shines is the steep terrain. But I as a practice and tell people, hey, if you're not working with a survey firm and you're creating, you're collecting data, like I don't even turn in a stitched map. I'll say, here's all the photos, you can process it yourself. I don't want to take that risk. And, especially Florida and California are two of the pretty strict states as far as you have to be a licensed surveyor to say that.
I would say, and I'm not saying this in a bad way, but the way that I got around it is the data that we were providing to our clients, we never claimed it was survey grade accurate. They just want a visual representation of their models, and just to have some kind of reference to look at, right? They never claimed, hey, you know, our lot line is off by X amount of inches or feet based off of our data. They just looked at it as a visual reference. And that's how we were able to get around that. I wouldn't say it's a loophole. It's just we weren't selling survey accurate data. We were just selling visually accurate data.
Yeah,
excuse me.
You're not selling something that's going to be stamped and recorded on file with the state that, hey, this is the latest survey on this parcel number.
Exactly. And anytime that we did have to turn over survey accurate data, we would work with a surveyor to have them stamp it off. They would be the final stamp of approval. Like they would have the final say on, okay, is this data accurate? Is it not? And that's just how you have to do it. There really is no other way around it. You can claim an accuracy, but it has to be that accuracy. You can't say, oh, mine's, you know, a tenth of a foot of accuracy on my models. Well, you got to prove it. And by being able to prove it, you're either leveraging RTK data or ground control points or smart targets, which is kind of a hybrid approach between RTK and smart targets. So that's what I would recommend for people that are trying to get into this space. Let's see here. You guys ask away. We're here answering questions. Whatever you guys have, we're going to do our best to answer them. Let's see if I can scroll up to earlier in the show to see what other questions we have. This is an interesting one. Archaeology. Have you done anything with that?
I have not. It's intriguing, but I've never seen it as a scalable business model. Not saying that it isn't. I haven't seen the vision for it, so it's not an avenue I've ever explored.
I've actually did a little bit of experimenting with it, where we were tasked with finding a Cherokee development somewhere in northern Georgia, and we were tasked to leverage LiDAR to generate a good surface model. Alongside with GPR, which is called ground penetrating radar, to see beneath the surface of the ground, like between 15 to 30 feet below the ground, to see where the settlement was. It is hit or miss. It's not perfect. We were able to generate a good surface model, but when it actually came to the efficacy of it, it was just we didn't know. And the archaeologists too, they were like, yeah, we don't know what else we can do with this. I mean, they tried doing what they could, but again, I mean, this site was however long ago that the Trail of Tears was. I'm bad at history, so forgive me, but however long ago that was, that's what essentially we were trying to find, is one of those settlements that went all the way through to Oklahoma. But I would say for just the terrestrial capture on the LiDAR side, I know, especially out in like the Middle East and Africa, they're starting to leverage this data gathering a whole lot more, alongside with high resolution photogrammetry. So they're bringing in still cameras and then actually capturing large areas of land of where settlements used to be, where burial grounds, graveyards used to be, and creating those digital twins for it just as an accurate model that they can have as a way to preserve it. Actually, a fun fact, and Kyle, I don't know if you know about this, but remember when the Notre Dame burned down? Was this last year, or is that 2021?
I remember, but I remember hearing about it, but I don't remember what year.
It was either last year or the year before. So this is actually really cool, and I tell this story all the time. But do you know how they were able to reconstruct it exact, like 1-to-1?
Mm-mm.
Through photogrammetry from a video game. So there's a video game called Assassin's Creed.
I do remember seeing that now that you say it.
Yeah, and they were able to reconstruct it because they were able to create they had a digital asset of it from a video game that came out, I think 12 or 14 years ago, which is wild. Like, this was the infancy. Like, this is when drone photogrammetry was still in the womb.
Yeah.
And they were able to bring this model back from 12 or 14 years ago from a video game that existed to then go and reconstruct the Notre Dame. Obviously, Ubisoft was the company that created the game Assassin's Creed. They donated their model graciously to the church so that, you know, they can get it all reconstructed, obviously with the $700 million that was donated to get it all fixed.
Yep.
But yeah, like that's a perfect example of archaeology right there, preserving history in the form of leveraging drones to do that. So I thought that was really interesting way of doing that.
Yep, that is cool. I remember seeing the story pop up. I never looked too far into it, but I thought it was cool. I saw the video game technology was what they ended up using.
Yeah, from 12, 14 years ago, which is wild. Like
Yeah.
to think of being able to bring back a digital twin of something from just a video game. Like that's cool.
Yep.
Okay, this is actually a good question here. I'm gonna pull it up so everybody can see. I'm a land surveyor in Washington State, trying to get into more drone work. How do you find clients / market yourself to potential clients? I'm jumping in late if this was already discussed. Well, this is really not a late discussion. I mean, this is stuff that's happening all the time. I would say yourself as a land surveyor, you can start leveraging this tool in-house. There really is no reason to go out and get clients for it. You know, if you're doing your boundary surveys, you need to have an accurate, up-to-date visual model of it. That's something that you can start applying to your clients immediately. Because as you know, Google Maps is out of date all the time with all the vegetation that grows over land. Even, you know, existing developments, right, to go and capture an up-to-date model. You can start leveraging that. But I mean, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have the one tool that's hardest to obtain. If you're a licensed land surveyor in Washington State, that's that's kind of your biggest piece of the puzzle. So now, anytime you're working on topography or anything like that, even a 15 or 20 acre site where it takes you 2 or 3 days to collect the data, you've got a PLS CAD drafted, all the software that's out there now and available to doing LiDAR, you can capture it, process it, and have your 1 foot contours or 2 foot or 5 foot or half foot, whatever your deliverables are, and have it all back within a day. So now it's, instead of spending a week working on a project, you can do it all within a day, which now allows you to take on more work, take on bigger opportunities. I think the states put out a decent bit of work, whether it be right-of-way work, stuff like that. We get calls to do that kind of stuff. With road widening and stuff like that, they need up-to-date LiDAR data for stuff like that. So I think
all the time.
What you're currently doing as a land surveyor, just starting to apply drone LiDAR is, it saves you time, and as you get more time, gives you more opportunity to market and find resources. I don't think you need to market that you're a drone service provider as a land surveyor. I think you just use it as your most efficient tool to collect data and create deliverables for your clients.
It's just how you leverage it ultimately. Yeah, I mean, we can run circles around this all day long, but it's just another tool in the toolbox to leverage. It's a more efficient tool that exists nowadays compared to the traditional methods of capturing all this data. I mean, I think the list goes on with all of the different ways that this data can be used, with verifying volumes of dirt, doing cut and fill models, doing, I mean, you can even start to get into some of the AI feature extraction with doing planimetrics and as-builts without even having to open up a CAD software, which I think is pretty cool. I don't know if you've ever played with that. Have you?
Yeah, we do a good bit, especially on the utility side, doing a lot of drafting in PLS CAD and kind of with the construction side of things.
It's so cool how efficient that stuff is now compared to I mean, when I was working at the last company I worked at, they used a lot of our aerial data to go and capture and create the as-built for the sites. I mean, this was a lot of commercial real estate property that we were working on, and yeah, I mean, they were doing all of their drawings off of it, which was pretty inefficient because it would take, a few days for it, where we're actually able to run a lot of this stuff through an AI system, and it drew all of our DXF files for us, and we didn't have to do anything. It was actually pretty nice. Let me see here. I think this is a pretty easy question for us to answer. Can you get into the industry with $3,000 or less?
Yes. To me, the OG and still the best. You talk about pound for pound fighter. The best pound for pound drone out there is the Phantom 4 Pro V2. To me it's the last drone that DJI put a lot of really good features all into one drone. Now they split it up into 3 or 4 different enterprise versions of the Mavic 3 if you want to do it. But I think you can find those used with batteries that don't have high cycles and under $1,500. Get into that, and then with the rest of your budget, you can either add a few more batteries, add a few accessories, just depending on what niche you get into. If you get into telecom, you'll want to add a GoPro or something to shoot your access roads, and add maybe a laptop and some external hard drives to store your data and upload it, or maybe a mobile hotspot. If you're getting into mapping, you're probably going to want to get more batteries, or maybe an effective way to charge in the field. So it really depends on what you're going into. But yes, you can 100% get in for less than $3,000. There's even the Air 2S. There's a lot of really cool drones out there in the $1,000 to $1,500 range. But best bang for your buck, in my opinion, is still the Phantom 4 Pro.
I would say the Air 2S is actually a good competitor to it, as you can get that drone for $1,000, or you can get a renewed model for like $800 on Amazon. Still have good warranty and insurance, all of that stuff on it, and get to mapping. I mean, you have that 1-inch sensor. It's 20 megapixels. Granted, it's not mechanical shutter, but I mean, I think that's been proven time and time again that you don't necessarily need a mechanical shutter in order to get this work done. Yes, it's nice to have, but it's not the end all be all.
I think the only limitation I've seen with the Air 2S is it's
connectivity.
No, it's the fixed aperture at 2.8.
Yeah.
So, like, if you're doing telecom inspections, you want to have an aperture around 5, so that when you're doing some of your closer in shots to the antennas and stuff like that, you're looking at connection points and stuff. Having the entire set in frames, you're either creating like 360 virtual models or 3D models, and a 2.8 that close to an object, you'll get some bokeh effect on kind of the outside panels, and it kind of creates a little distortion on modeling. But that's the only limitation I've seen, and really it's only in telecom, because when you're mapping at 200 feet, 2.8 aperture isn't going to be much of a difference from a 5 aperture. You're too far away from the subject. So I think really, telecom and inspection work is the only limitation I've seen to the Air 2S, but it does a great job for everything else.
No, it's a fantastic drone. I mean, it works directly with Drone Deploy, UGCS, and you get your 20 megapixel. I would say though, if you can spend a bit more, the Mavic 3 Enterprise, it's a solid system. It is, I would say it is a good upgrade from the Phantom 4 Pro. It's newer, right? You're going to have better support. You're going to have better flight time out of it compared, you're going to get about 25, 26 minutes out of the Phantom 4 Pro, depending on how you fly it. With the Mavic 3 Enterprise, at minimum, I would say on a good day, like 40 minutes of flight time. And I've gotten that consistently time and time again, with a lot of the sample data sets, and even some of my in-person workshops that I host. We'll fly 4 or 5 missions on the same battery. And these are different complex missions. We'll do a regular mapping model. We'll do corridor mapping. We'll do oblique capture. I mean, we're hopping all over the place, and this drone just keeps running and running and running. It's like the Energizer Bunny. If anybody gets that reference, I mean, that thing just works. It's a workhorse.
I agree. I think if you're getting into commercial work, the Mavic 3 Enterprise is really hard to beat. The
Yeah.
one thing I don't like is that it doesn't do great on video. So it's not like if you want be able to work, be able to have for play, you're going on vacation or whatever and want to shoot some cool cinematic stuff. That's the one thing I wish DJI would have put in was more video output. Like I think they have 2 different settings you can use.
Yeah, they cut it down ridiculously. It's still a good dynamic range, but
Yeah.
At that point, if you're concerned about that, then just go pick up a Mini 3 because you don't need RTK for capturing some videos out wherever you are.
Yep.
But let's see. We're going to do this last question here. And this one's actually directed at you, Kyle. It has to do with telecom.
Yeah.
For telecom, pole audit inspections, is the technology there yet for capturing very small conductors? What about AI for processing attachments?
Yeah, so I think the technology, yes, is there. Certain companies are starting to explore LiDAR capture. One of the kind of difficult things about LiDAR capture with telecom is needing the ability to oblique. I think that's probably like the one situation where I'd say the DJI L1 LiDAR sensor stands out because you've got basically the Phantom 4 Pro sensor for your photogrammetry. You have the ability to gimbal from 0 degrees all the way down to 90, so you can capture oblique. If you're looking for really, kind of close centimeter accuracy on modeling. But then also, flying now, I see people doing it with the M300 and the P1 for really detailed capture. And then, yes, on the back end, there are certain companies that are starting to use AI for, kind of recognition of hardware that companies are installing, and even doing things like stuff being out of position, stuff not being in compliance. I see some of the models on the back end. It's not what we're doing, but the back end of what the companies we work for do. They've been using AI for about a year now to automate some of these processes to create kind of TPA, tilt, plumb, and azimuth models. And so it's really cool to watch the evolution of it. And yes, I think that the technology's there already, and we're starting to explore it. And I think AI is going to become a big part of the inspection side of telecom.
Yeah, I think AI across all industries, within the drone industry itself, is going to be a crucial role. I don't think it's going to replace too much of the manual side of data acquisition and I think it's going to help out on the analysis part with quicker anomaly detection, which will still need to be audited by a human. But yeah, I think it's just going to make things more efficient. I don't necessarily think it's going to doom the drone pilot, which is why I asked the question very early on: is are drone pilots becoming irrelevant, or will they become irrelevant? And
No,
I think we can compare it to even going back to the car industry, back when GM and Ford were building their massive plants and they started replacing people with robots, or people with robots, right? But sure, became more efficient, but then look at all the other roles that opened up with all the QA and QC. That's essentially what's going to happen to the drone industry too.
Yep.
At least that's my opinion.
Fusing this question with the question earlier is, drone pilots are not going to become irrelevant. I think you're actually starting to assist more of the subject matter experts in these industries, people who would have to visually look at tens of thousands of photos to try to find some of these anomalies and deficiencies within systems. You're now training a computer to go through and filter. So now instead of having to look at 10,000 images to conduct an inspection, now you're only looking at the 75 photos that the AI software pointed out and said, hey, you've taught me that these are potential issues. Now these guys can look at the 75 photos and say, okay, these are issues and this is why. These are not issues. This is just rust, or this is just a shadow. But continue to point these things out, and I will continue to tell you yes or no. And that's how they're training the models and getting them more robust. So I do think as we continue to do inspections and collect data, drone pilots aren't going anywhere. I think that you're going to make the aggregation and the analysis side easier. and kind of not really take their jobs, because somebody will always have to verify. It's similar to a surveyor. A surveyor doesn't have to go shoot in 1x1 or a 5x5 grid to get a topo anymore, because they can use the contour files from a drone. But a surveyor still needs to verify that it was done correctly, it's in the correct datum, and the boundaries are set properly, and everything's to local, state, and federal regulations.
Absolutely. And I think that's going to do it here for us. So Kyle, seriously, thank you so much for hanging out with us this evening. Sure, you guys are going to see more of Kyle. We're working on some projects together, and a pretty fun controversial one, which I'm the controversial one. Kyle's the one who's keeping me out of all of the trouble here. But yeah, if you guys want to learn more about what Kyle is doing and follow him online, Kyle, what's the best way people can find you?
Yeah, I mean, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. We haven't really rolled out a ton. We've got our website live for like drone purchases and stuff, but everything else, our DSP side of things, and the whole kind of community that we were talking about earlier, we haven't rolled out yet. We're getting ready to, and then once we do, we'll also be on YouTube as well. We've got about 80 or 90 pieces of content ready to roll out. We want to have just kind of a fused universal launch into everything, because some of our action stuff from YouTube is to go check out the online community, and I don't want you to go click the link in the description and nothing's there. So
absolutely. Awesome. Well, hey, Kyle, thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and close out with everybody here, and we'll chat soon.
Yes, sir. Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And just like that, guys, this is another stream of mine being wrapped up here. Just again, last few things. I am hosting a virtual drone photogrammetry workshop next weekend on May 6th and May 7th. If you guys are interested in attending, I did open up a few last minute early bird slots, $150 before it goes up to $180. And it's a fully recorded event. So if you aren't able to attend through the entire event, you'll be able to watch everything else after the fact. In addition, this weekend, if anybody is here in Alabama, I'm hosting an in-person workshop. So I have a guest speaker coming in and some cool people already going to be at the workshop. I'm hoping to get this a fully sold out event. It's a hands-on experience where you get to learn everything about drone photogrammetry. In addition, if you're new, thank you so much for subscribing. I've got a lot more content coming out. I've got a pretty cool video coming out this weekend as well. So be sure to be on the lookout for that. And with that being said, I seriously appreciate all of you guys being here. I will see you guys in the next one.